everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's your DC Spotlight from the last week of May 2024, May 28th. Sorry, it's coming out a couple days late. Rocky was in town this last weekend. We had a blast. It was Phoenix Fan Fusion, formerly known as Phoenix Comic Con. And then obviously, I didn't get a chance to read the books over the weekend. He didn't really either. And then got home and sure had to catch up on the day job stuff and what have you. So coming out a couple days late, not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and I do want to interject and thank you again publicly for being an amazing host. That was wonderful meeting your family, Lois, your daughter Aspen. It was a pleasure being down there. I got to see how the Comic Source lives in Phoenix, Arizona. What a wonderful city, nice and hot, great weather, great times. And enjoyed those panels we did, and I will be doing sort of a video at some point, probably in the next couple weeks of that experience, and maybe I'll get you on. We'll talk about some of the things, some of the fun that we had. But thanks again.
Yeah, it was. It really was a great time. The show, just briefly again, because Rocky and I are hoping to do kind of a larger episode about it. But yeah, the show itself much more well attended this year in terms of fans. But conversely, I think that there were plenty of vendors and retailers there, but fewer people selling comics themselves, but a lot more people selling all kind of like toys and collectibles and that was kind of on the upswing and sort of took the place of some of the comic vendors that are usually there. So in terms of, for me, there just wasn't a lot of, boxes to go digging through and what have you. But there were some. I mean, I managed to spend my budget and then some, and with no trouble at all. But I would like to see, if I had any wish for the show, I would like to see more comic retailers and also more comic publishers. And maybe that goes hand in hand, right? Like Dark Horse used to do the show, Image used to do the show, Valiant used to do the show. I think I want to see. Was it Boom? There was another studio that used to always do it as well that wasn't there this year. Oh, Aspen was another one that used to always be there and wasn't. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely room to grow in terms of that. As far as people and attendance, I think they're doing really well. Back up to kind of probably the peak of where they were before all the nonsense happened a few years ago with Jason David Frank and what have you. So just real brief, like your thoughts on the show itself, Rocky. You think it's a pretty good one to go to?
I do. I actually enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the people. I didn't think it was as crowded as some too. I thought the crowd was more manageable than some of the one than even in Calgary at times. And it's about the same number of people that attend, about 90 to 100,000, I think, attended. And I really like the outside atmosphere. I love the pubs that we went to, particularly Willow's Taco Stand there, I think it was called. And I really like the atmosphere and just the proximity of the hotel and just the layout and the design in general. We joked about the escalators that were there because the escalators were actually smoking, and they were at one point you could only go single file in the escalators, and you and I joked about that. But all in all, there were some hiccups that without going into the details, there were some hiccups regarding some of the logistics, but overall, I thought it was well attended, and I do think it was organized well enough that it didn't detract from my enjoyment of it. There are some stories that you and I can tell when we do the overall review, but overall, I would very much recommend it. And there was some like I say, there's some logistical hiccups there, but beyond that, I quite enjoyed it, and I'm kind of glad it had a different feel than some of the other fan expos and stuff. And I don't necessarily think that it needs to be affiliated with some of that. I kind of like the idea of not a monopoly on Comic Cons. I like the fact that it's its own sort of Comic Con, and I sort of like that aspect of it. Notwithstanding the fact that it would have been nice to see a little bit more comic book retailers there, but I mean. We'll see. We'll see as it evolves exactly what's going to happen to it, because I know that you had some comments about that and you told me some interesting history about the past. But I have a lot more to say, but we can save that for later.
Yeah, and it is pretty interesting because of the growing pains that they've experienced and what have you. And I think in terms of any kind of logistical challenges that certainly were there, it's like they were kind of behind the scenes. I don't really think they've affected the average attendee, or they were even aware of it. So from that perspective, doing a good But in terms of books this week, although we are reviewing them a bit late, I'd say it's an above average week overall, although kind of a lower ceiling. There's no, even though it says there's some absolute power sort of tie-ins and teases, man, ancillary at best when it comes to Green Arrow and Power Girl, which are supposed to tie into Absolute Power and House of Brainiac, respectively. But overall, I thought it was a solid week. What do you think, Rocky?
I'm gonna say overall, I was slightly, well, in terms of the numbers. I really only felt that I really enjoyed three of them, three of the comic books that we'll talk about, and the rest I thought were a little bit below my expectation. So I got a slightly different opinion than you on that, but you know, um, I'll try to keep her positive. There's probably gonna be a couple rants here. Lord knows I've had some time to digest some of the stories that we're going to be reviewing, so I'm going to be exercising some extreme diplomacy in the way I articulate myself this evening, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm very curious to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sort of taking a different tack in a way, and not purposefully. I'm not sugarcoating anything, but I don't know. Maybe it was the joy of the con for the week that when I read a
Yeah.
couple of these, um, and even ones that I had sort of glanced at before, and then when I sat down and read them, I don't know. I was bringing a little bit of a different perspective than usual,
Hmm.
and trying to enjoy them for what they are rather than complaining about what they could be.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit interesting
Well,
from
and well,
that
in that
aspect.
spirit, we'll try to do that in that spirit. We're gonna we'll stay as positive as we can.
Yeah, and kicking it off with Harley Quinn 40, the big freezy from Tini Howard, Natasha Bustos is on the art, Nick Filardi on colors, Steve Wands on letters. This is one that once the multiversal Harley Quinn story was kind of over, I was hoping for a little more grounded Harley Quinn, and instead it's zany, not zany in a multiversal way anymore, but still sort of zany as Harley is taking it upon herself to sort of psychoanalyze different villains, while they're committing crimes and what have you. She thinks that she's going to find a way to break through to them in a way, and it's interesting to say the least. Not really something that I would necessarily choose. A story I would necessarily choose to if I had to pick a Harley Quinn story. I've said it many times. My preference is a more realistic Harley Quinn, and this is not that at all. Um, but one of the things that is interesting, so she's trying to psychoanalyze Mr. Freeze. He rebuffed her, then he called her back and said, "No, I actually do want your help." Maybe because she's going with Mr. Freeze, she's wearing this wintry outfit. It's much more reminiscent of her original Jester outfit, kind of the beloved one that we know from the Batman um, animated series cartoon. Um, and she's got like fur-lined boots and what have you. And I think the Natasha Bustos art sort of suits the fun, almost childlike story that we're being told here. Um, and so I found myself like trying to step back and look at this from a different perspective, right? Like I'm always complaining it's not the type of Harley Quinn story that I necessarily want to read, but then I'm thinking, who's this for? Who's the audience? We're introduced to a couple of potential henchmen for Mr. Freeze, and they have what I think are cool costumes if you're like a younger reader. Like you look at one, um, Armada, kind of based on Armada, the like Spanish Armada ships, what have you, and she has like almost like this beehive style hairdo, but instead of like actual hair on top, it's like a ship, like an old
Yeah.
pirate ship or galleon or what have you that has little cannons that shoot things out or whatever. Like it's completely ridiculous. But when you look at the costume, like if you're a little kid, you probably, oh, that's fun, that's cool, whatever. The other guy is Vampire Squid, who's wearing he has Batman colors. Like all he's missing is the bat symbol from the middle from his chest, and he would look like Batman from the neck down. But from the neck up, he's like a deep sea diver. So he's got like a giant helmet, like the ones you'd see, way back in the day, a big bowl with, only like the little port to look out or what have you. And so while I may think they look a little ridiculous, um, there is kind of a whimsy and a fun to them. And maybe it's because of that, that I kind of tried to read this in that spirit. Like if I'm a really young reader and I'm trying to understand Harley Quinn, And that goes hand in hand with the way that she talks to Maxie Zeus, who typically is a bat villain that I can't stand, that I think is just silly and ridiculous or whatever. But again, I'm trying to look at this from a perspective of, are they, who are they trying to reach, what new readers they're trying to reach, and what have you. So, I'm not going to say this is for everybody. I'm not going to say it's even for longtime Harley Quinn fans who at this point are, probably much older than 20, I'm going to say. Um, 20, mid 20s and up, that are looking for more mature stories. This is not that. It's not. But if you're a young reader, if you're, 12 and under, you're probably loving this. So again, I'm just trying to approach it from the perspective of who is this for. And when I step back and I stop looking at it critically, in terms of, man, this isn't working for me, and just try to read it objectively, it's not actually that bad of a story. It's mildly entertaining. I kind of actually am seeing Maxie Zeus in a new light as well, and enjoying a little bit more of his characterization. But I do have to say, even with that perspective, I just don't think that this is a story where, if I have to read this issue after issue, I can't I can't step back and do this every time, because it gets old after a while. Like, the story is not for me. And this run has been a little up and down for me, much like Tini Howard's Catwoman run has been. So, and it's all predicated on the fact, you go back to the very beginning, and I'm not a Harley Quinn fan, So maybe that is actually what lets me kind of step back once in a while and go, well, I can see who this is for and what they're trying to go for here, even if it's not necessarily working for me. So, yeah. Anything to add from your side?
Well, just that I actually think that I would just give you a little bit of a counterpoint to your point that this story doesn't have a mature element to it. I actually thought that the most touching part of the story for me was Zeus, like his Max's story about his wife dying. I think that's a serious subject matter. He loses his wife, and actually managed to make me feel something for the villain. So, Tini Howard does a good job, actually made me feel for his particular circumstance and the struggles that he had. I particularly like your point about the costume change on Harley. I think that's a very good point. That I actually think that it was a wise decision to make, because the crazy sort of like classic clown outfit that Harley had, it originated with the animated series. It's more appropriate for her in this particular issue, in this particular story, because she does have more of an animated sort of feel to her and an innocence to her in this story. This is clearly not the Harley Quinn that has a bomb in her head and is working for Amanda Waller in the Suicide Squad. It's a very different Harley Quinn, not mainstream Harley Quinn. And in its own way, though, it's got its own sense of sweetness and sensibility that sort of suits the story that is being told. It's just but as you said, it is kind of jarring to sort of like the traditional DC House style of story that we're getting. Not that it has to be a reflection of that. It's just it is something that is not normally on my preference. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have its share of fans, and clearly Harley does. There's all kinds of different Harley Quinn stories, and this is definitely one that I think has its fans. And I really like the idea of a woman wearing a wig that is ultimately a ship that shoots cannons off the top of her head. That was kind of crazy and zany. So it had its zany moments. But ultimately, this was not my this would not be my cup of tea. But I'm sure fans exist for this interpretation of Harley.
Yeah, and it goes back to one other thing I'll mention. We're talking about Harley last issue, where she's at odds with the police, and supposedly she's a hero in the pages of Batman, but yet she's doing committing out and out crimes here. It doesn't, like you said, it feels like an out of continuity Harley at this point, because she's just not behaving the way that she does in other places. So, all right, moving on. Next up, we have Green Arrow. This is supposedly an absolute power tie-in, written by Joshua Williamson, who we know is the architect of absolute power. Well, one of the architects. Mark Waid is really kind of the head guy, but Joshua Williamson certainly involved. Phil Hester, Eric Gapster, and Sean Isaacs are listed as artists. Colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr., letters by Troy Petrie. Again, very tangentially, I would say, involved in absolute power. Countdown to absolute power. Really, we have two books here. We saw at the end of the last one, Green Arrow being confronted by an older Merlin far in the future, being attacked by hard light um, images or projections, basically holograms that are like have physical form that are attacking him in the form of all his sidekicks and other members of the Green Arrow family, I guess we would say. He's able to summon the rest of his actual family there um, through some sort of mother box technology or what have you. Um, so he's able to bring them all there and have them fight off and defeat Merlin, uh, sort of rather easily, actually, sort of anticlimactic. And then Diggle shows up, who again, it's one of those things, right? And the TV show was very popular. The Arrow TV show was very popular at one time. Diggle was a character there, so then they bring him over to the comics. Never thought it worked. Feel like he's wonky. I feel like he's a superfluous character. But anyway, he shows up for whatever reason. That's who Green Arrow calls, and he takes Merlin away, and then transports the whole family to the desert island that Green Arrow was trapped on, long ago during his basically origin story. And Leanne and Roy Harper are reunited, which is a touching moment. And then they play some volleyball and they just hang out because Ollie knows that tough times are coming with what Amanda Waller has to do, what she's asked him to do, and what have you. And we're next issue's teased the Waller problem, and they even ask Ollie at one point. They ask Green Arrow, well, "What about the sanctuary mask?" And he's like, "That's tomorrow's problem." So, I mean, this the first half of the issue and the second half of the issue, and this one feels so in tone, feels so wildly disparate. It's kind of jarring. And yeah, for all the buildup of Merlin or whatever, I just this Green Arrow series has been a bit messy in technical execution. I feel like, I mean, I'm a Green Arrow fan. Like I typically, when Green Arrow has a solo series, I'm typically collecting that. Um, this one just hasn't been up to par. It's been just very uneven. So hopefully it gets a little better. I think Green Arrow titles are best when they're just focused on Ollie or maybe Ollie and Black Canary. Um, when the cast gets too big, I think it's kind of a struggle, as it is with any team book, but specifically for Green Arrow, because I feel like he's the type of character, because he doesn't have superpowers, you're a little more reliant on characterization to carry it through. And it's harder to do when you have a big cast. And then you add in the fact that Williamson has been, show running a lot of events and what have you, and Green Arrow's been tying in with that. Yeah, it just, like I said, it's felt uneven. I mean, the argument could be made, this is 12 issues in, that the entire book to this point has been about Merlin and what he's put Green Arrow through and trying to keep his family separated. So 11 and a half issues before we finally get a resolution. And then, I mean, 11 issues and it's all wrapped up relatively conveniently. Green Arrow calls in the rest of the family. Merlin says, well, I can create as many hard light illusions as I want to defeat everybody. And Ollie's like, well, no, because all it takes to disrupt this light is, a loud sound at the right frequency. Black Canary hollers, she screams, and fight over. That's it. Like, she might as well have just pushed the easy button, So anyway, I just thought it was just inconsistent. I haven't been a fan of this series, actually. But that being said, I thought the art was very good. The art in the series has been very good throughout. That's one thing I can say for sure. So hopefully with it tying into Absolute Power a little more closely next issue, it'll feel a little more consequential. I guess we'll see. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I do want to call out artists Phil Hester, Eric Gabster, and Sean Isaacs, all of them working together. It's not too often that you have three different artists work together so well. I really love the art in this issue. I really did. Despite the fact that I'm still glad that I stopped collecting this at issue 5. I think because it continues to meet unfortunately continue to meet my prediction story wise, where basically nothing of substance happens, and nothing of substance happens. Merlin was defeated at the end of issue 6, oh great, we have another story arc. It's this series has been extended, and guess who the villain is at the end of the 12th issue? Merlin. Because at the end of issue 6, he was lost in time. But no, they had to bring him back so that we get sort of a repeat, but just in a different setting. Now, having said that, if there is no question here that if you are a fan of Green Arrow and you love the Green Arrow family and the extended members, you're going to love this because they do all come together and there is a happy ending. And just to hold myself accountable and to scold myself, of all the times, and you're in that category too, of all the times that we've sounded like, Marsha, we always talked about hope with DC. This does have a feeling of hope at the end, and I love how Black Canary. I think Black Canary looks gorgeous. I love seeing her canary cry. I love the reunion of Leah and her father, Roy Harper. I think that was great. On the other hand, I thought it was given very, very short thrift. 12 issues in, and we got, how many pages did we get between the reunion between Leah and Roy Harper? Very few. And may I just add, no story substance at all in terms of developing their relationship at all, other than just reuniting them after 12 issues. Now, you can say that's because he's dealing with so many characters, but we didn't learn anything about any of the characters in all these 12 issues at all. What character did we learn more? We learned more about Merlin than we did about a single character, or whether Green Arrow or any other one. There's no excuse for that. There's an excuse for that. I just think I thought it was lazy writing. And if Joshua Williamson has too many comic books on his plate, have somebody else write this one. Or frankly, you shouldn't have killed off Green Arrow in the first place, because it's clear in my mind that I don't think you really knew what to do with Green Arrow in the first place coming out of it, because those first 6 issues where he's suddenly in the 31st century just made no sense. We still never got an explanation how he survived. I could go on and on and on, but people can go listen to my past rants on this. Now, having said all that, the art's good. We finally get Leah and Roy Harper. You're united. I look forward to their future stories. I sincerely hope those stories are not told in the pages of Green Arrow. Straight up. I want them to have their own series, or Roy Harper to be on another team and just devoid and remove himself from this. I want Leah to be on another team herself, just to remove herself from this title, because it's just not working. But I have a bias. There's some people that love this series. So be it. My bias is Green Arrow's not a family man, and he shouldn't be written as one, because that's not who he is. He's always been a jerk, and I don't know why they want to make guys who are just he's the lovable jerk who just doesn't really, he always has dysfunction in his family, and to remove that is, once again, it's this everybody needs a happy ending, because, and it's just you can still have hope, but still a little bit of dysfunction, because that's where the fun is. But that's my mini rant.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, up next we have maybe another rant forthcoming. The Flash #9, The Crown, written by Si Spurrier, art by Ramon Perez and Vasco Gregev, colors by Matt Herms, letters by Hassan Otsman Elhal. Give us your thoughts on this one.
You're making me go first.
Yep, there I am.
Okay. I've had a lot of time to digest this. I remember. For those listening, I got a compliment, Jace, on his living room where he's, or one of his living rooms where he set up his computer and his 3 big screens I got to say, I got to read. I got to do at least one read of this Flash issue 9 while I was in Phoenix, and. I can, just for those who might be curious, my understanding of Flash issue 9 was no different in Phoenix than it was here in southern Alberta. and what that means in layman's terms is I still remain a little bit confused. But in the spirit of trying to give it as much as much fairness as I possibly can. Si Spurrier has filled in some of the blanks. He has filled in some of the blanks. And the way I understand it, and if I am wrong in how I summarize this, it's a quick summary. The error, I fall upon the sort of my ignorance if I summarize this wrong, but my understanding is that the stillness has a connection to the Speed Force. The stillness desires to die because they're cosmological beings and they're bored. The stillness essentially hires the employs sort of the archangels to sort of help end their existence and their entropy. The archangels have done a number of things. The archangels have spoken to Inspector Pilgrim, told him about how lying to him about the speedsters disrupting the Speed Force. The archangels have also made a deal with the Rogues Gallery to manipulate and plot against all the Flashes, particularly Barry and Wally. And the archangels have also have paradoxically gone back into various timelines where different Reverse Flashes have died, and they've taken the essence of all those dead Throns and created the Crown of Thrones. And all these machinations are used against Barry Allen and against Wally West, while Wally is trying to figure out what's going on and trying to side shift in between different dimensions. And meanwhile, his own children, particularly Jay, is learning about his powers. And one of the revelations in this issue is the younger brother, young Wade West, younger version and an older version, a young childlike version of Wade and an older adult version of Wade have come back in time to help the Flash family defeat the Archangels and the Rogues Gallery. So that's it in a nutshell. I want to compliment Si Spurrier on the one hand for introducing all these cosmological beings, the stillness, the uncoiled, the archangels. But my one criticism is that despite the fact that he's dealing with these high concept characters, what I find missing for myself as a reader is I'm missing the metaphor. I'm a sucker for a good metaphor. I'm missing a theme. I'm missing what exactly is he trying to say with these cosmological beings and their interaction. Is he trying to say something about life? Is he trying to say something about cause and effect? Is he trying to say something about time? Is he trying to say something about family? Because I'm not really getting it. This seems like a story where players are just sort of thrown on the board in a messy chessboard, and everyone's sort of, and it's like no one knows the rules of chess, and the pieces and they're being moved all over the board, and it's unnecessarily confusing. And there was more clarity provided in issue 9, but I shouldn't have had to wait to issue 9 to get that clarity. Maybe I had a little bit with issue 8, but this feels like it just feels unnecessarily heavy with substance and plot without. It's missing I'm trying to get a handle on what is he. So what? Because there's nothing worse when I'm reading 9 issues in and I say to myself, so what? This issue ends with Barry confronting Batman in a metal suit. Why? Like, where is this going? What's the central message of this story supposed to be? I'll end by saying this, that I would love to have heard Si Spurrier's elevator pitch to the editor that caused the editor to recommend that Jeremy Adams be removed off this title. And I say that with great respect, because it must have been a hell of an elevator pitch. I'd like to think that if I heard the elevator pitch, maybe I would understand whatever it was that made the editor go, wow, we have to get Jeremy Adams off the Flash because this story has to be told. Now, we got another 3 issues before Si Spurrier's Flash arc is finished. There's perhaps a lot more story to tell. We got the Rogues Gallery, we got the Archangels, we got the Uncoiled, we got the Stillness still in play, and we got a younger and older version of Wade West coming from the past, coming from the future to help the Flash family. And so there's a lot of story left at least another 3 issues of story left to tell. 3 issues left to tell. But I can be cautiously optimistic. I'm still waiting for that moment where I go, oh, cool, as opposed to me going, oh man, I think I get it, but I'm not sure. So I'm really curious to know what you think of this issue.
Well, I'm still in what's going on? I'm not sure. I definitely, but here's the thing, like this issue in particular, this happens at times with the series where a little bit of the kind of the bigger ideas come through, and you say, "Oh, yeah, that's kind of cool." Like we found out the rogues were sort of manipulating, um, Linda, and everything that they were being told wasn't necessarily true or what have you. And I appreciate that he's trying to work with the stillness and the speed force and what have you. And perhaps there's hints in this issue that they're one and the same. Um, the fact that the pilgrim who's shown up the last few issues and what have you, we're trying to learn more about him. The fact that it's revealed that he's actually uh, Wyatt West, that was again a cool moment. Like, yeah, that's really cool. There, he's going back and rescuing his self as a baby. Again, like these are cool ideas. These are fun ideas. Um, but when we're talking about the archangels and all that sort of cosmic gobbledygook, that's where it starts to fall apart. Um, and and the fact that Barry is there and Wally is there, like I like that both Flashers are there, even though they don't seem to be on the same page. And it's almost like he's got the roles mixed up, like a little bit. Like Wally's the one that's sort of trying to figure things out cerebrally, and Barry's the one doing the fighting. And maybe he's personally, doing that purposefully, where he wants to kind of switch up their traditional roles. But Barry's sort of doing more of the action stuff, and it just feels weird and it just feels wonky. Um, and yeah, again, it might be a situation where once it's all said and done, and it's kind of I might have to have somebody explain it to me, but then it'll end up being a good story. I don't know. And the art, so again, very up and down. Seems like a theme here, inconsistent storytelling, what have you. And the same with the art. I sort of complained about the Mike Diodato art. I think it was the wrong choice early on, despite how talented he is. But this art, yeah, is, I don't think it's as complicated as the Diodato art, but it's also not in quality up to the level that we had before. So yeah, very very sort of confusing, and the cliffhanger moment at the end with he's Barry's about to fight a Batman in a metal suit. Yeah, it didn't. I don't think it landed the way Si Spurrier wanted it to. Instead of being, oh cool, I can't wait for the next issue, you just end up with this like what?
Yeah.
And I haven't actually gone. Typically, I go when Flash comes out. I go to Comic Book Roundup, and I look just to see how people generally feel about it. If things are trending up and down, and this series has trended down every issue, both critically and from fans. It's had a lower score than the issue before it. So take that for what you will, but I take that to mean that the series is losing readership and not doing very well. But I haven't gone and looked in a few issues, so maybe I'll do that and I'll report back. So don't worry. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Up next, we have Batman Dark Age. This is from writer Mark Russell. Mike Allred is the artist. Laura Allred on colors. Dave Sharp on letters. Hope you guys all had a chance to listen to me chat with Mark the other day about his current Kickstarter campaign for Traveling to Mars, which is a fantastic series. I highly recommend it. You'll be able to get an exclusive hardcover in that campaign, so go and check that out. Also, last time we had him on, he was talking about Death Ratioed, which is a one-shot from AWA. That actually came out this week. It's about a guy that's in a coma. He wakes up. He's in a coma for decades. He wakes up from the coma. He finds out that he now lives in a world where if you get too many dislikes on social media, they kill you. Your ratio is too low. You're not liked by society. They take you out. So likes and dislikes are very obviously important in that society. So that's out this week. Check it out if you're so inclined. But anyway, we're here to talk about Batman Dark Age. It's been fantastic. It's really interesting. This issue in particular, it's a bit of a catch-up issue in a lot of ways. It covers a vast period of time. It shows Batman joining the Justice League. It shows how he's sort of struggling to make a difference in Gotham rather than just punching. The fact that Wayne Enterprises is being run by Roman Sionis, Black Mask, for those that don't realize that. This is a different multiversal version of Batman and Roman and what have you. And really, it's Pariah. He's the one calling the shots. He's making Wayne Enterprises a ton of money because he knows the future. He knows what's to come. And Roman is using that knowledge to basically get people hooked on painkillers through Wayne Pharmaceuticals, and then when they can no longer afford it or they're no longer able to get the prescription, they turn to illegal versions of those drugs. So these guys are just getting fat. They're fat cats that are running the board, and Batman Bruce Wayne realizes that in a way it's his own family, his own family's company that's causing all the strife in Gotham. So how does he stop that? He can't. That's not just a problem you can punch away. So he joins the Justice League. That doesn't seem to be the answer. He's trying to meet with Jim Gordon and see if he can come up with a plan there. He's talking to Alfred. Alfred's the trusty sidekick. He's working with him, trying to figure it out. And it's just a real, almost a throwback style story in a way, almost like a simple story in terms of the villains are villainous and Bruce is heroic. It's not kind of the gray area sort of, is Bruce doing the right thing with the violence and that sort of thing. It's in that way, it's a little more innocent in a way, I would say, almost like a throwback to the Silver Age, but still a very, serious story. So black hats, it's white hats, and sort of, I don't want to say simplistic, but just very simple in that way of, you know who the good guys are, you know who the bad guys are. And so it's a very classic feeling story, I guess is the best way to put it. And for that reason, I think the Mike Allred art works really well, even though I'm not a fan of his particular style or what have you. I think his line weights are too heavy for my taste. But it's interesting, and it ties in with the Superman Space Age story that we already had from Mark Russell a while back. So, I think Mark is, even though it's a different Batman and a different part of the DC multiverse, and events aren't happening exactly as we've seen them play out other places, I think he's nailing the core of the character. And I really enjoy that Bruce is, struggling to do the right thing, because again, this is a different Bruce Wayne. It's a Bruce Wayne that got in a lot of trouble as a kid, that acted out, that was rebellious and what have you. And he's taking all that life experience and trying to become a better Batman, trying to be a better hero for his city. And it feels very authentic in that way. So I'm really digging it. And again, even though personally I'm not a fan of Allred's art, it works here. It's the style of art that this type of story should have. And of course, if you're talking Mike Allred line work, there's nobody better to color him than his wife. She does a fantastic job. Because again, I'm talking about this as a kind of a throwback, classic feeling story. You really want bright primary colors in those types of stories, because it does lend to that feel and that vibe. And that's true here as well. So yeah, this is, I'm enjoying this possibly more than Superman Space Age, if that's possible. But yeah, this is my favorite issue of the series so far. Really enjoyed it. What'd you think?
I'm definitely enjoying it more than Superman Space Age. I thought Superman Space Age was surprisingly. I just found it kind of boring. It was very sort of by the numbers, and it wasn't bad by any means. It was enjoyable enough. I just thought it was generally boring, and it didn't provide anything new. It didn't make me think of Superman in a different way. It was sort of like again by the numbers.
Series,
What's that?
That's an Eisner nominated series you're calling boring.
Yeah, well, I don't. Well, we can talk about that. I don't agree with every series that's been nominated for an Eisner. Although lately, in the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've agreed with many of the Eisner nominations. So Eisners are slowly winning me over with their choices. And in any event,
they need to put you on the selection committee next year.
Or not, but I would happily be on the selection committee. But they probably wouldn't. They would listen to some of my reviews and probably decide not to do that. And that's okay. I perhaps I sail by a different wind. That's all right. But I enjoy this Batman Dark Age because I actually enjoy. There's a slightly different twist on Batman. One of the things that I really liked here, that I liked how. I liked how Mark Russell sort of draws the dichotomy between Bruce Wayne, of course, being the playboy at night, and he's also Batman. So he's got the dark, he's the dark knight, but during the day, he's the light playboy, right? You got the dark and the light aspects of his character. But Also, with respect to Wayne Enterprises is split. It's schizophrenic. In fact, Wayne Enterprises is like the Two-Face in the story. It's got its darker half run by Black Mask, the Zionist character, and it's where it's corporate corruption. And then you got Bruce Wayne that owns 50%, exactly 50% of Wayne Enterprises, and he's using it for charitable purposes. And so there's this ongoing dichotomy and conflict between the board at Wayne Enterprises versus Bruce Wayne. On the one hand, he's making sure that Gotham is the people of Gotham are benefiting from the wealth of Wayne Enterprises. On the other hand, that flies up against a lot of the problems, which are also caused by the corruption, by the 50% corruption at Wayne Enterprises. So I really like that interplay there because it pulls Bruce Wayne right into the fray. And it puts him in a central dilemma that carries itself throughout the story, that he's literally both the hero, but also directly linked to the central problem of crime in Gotham City. And I really like how that is played out. I also like that the fact that there's still that ongoing mystery with respect to the Pariah from the original Crisis, and the Pariah was the one character that it was also in the Superman Space Age story. Pariah seems to show up at all these meetings, and he's a member of the board that owns 50% of Wayne Enterprises, and yet all he talks about is doom and gloom and how life is pointless, it's all going to end soon. And we know that things are going to end in 1985. We know that the original Crisis, that both this Superman Space Age and this Batman Dark Age have basically an endpoint, mainly being July 1985 is when all the multiverse ends. And so Pariah is sort of sprouting this this stuff we know to happen about the end of existence. How does that play into this particular story? Pariah played an integral role in the Superman story, and in particular in regard to how it sort of led to the way that story ended. And as you said, it was nominated for an Eisner, so it was a good story in many people's eyes, particularly those that hand out awards. I'm really curious to know how Pariah is going to play into this. And I love Bruce Wayne's struggle to sort of, as Batman, he talks to Superman, he talks to Commissioner Gordon, he tries to find a place among the Justice League, but it's too cosmic. He wants to focus more on Gotham. It's really well done here. And at the end, when he meets Green Arrow, of course, who is Oliver Queen, who he went to Vietnam with in earlier issues, and ultimately ends up rescuing a member of the Faceless Society who, of course, initially being a bad person, a member of the Faceless Society, well, it looks like it's going to end up being Dick Grayson, his sidekick, but that's hinted at. That'll be coming next issue. So this is my favorite issue so far, and that's saying something because I really enjoyed the previous issues. So I'm definitely on board for this, and I would, who knows, maybe this is another Eisner nomination next year for this, but I enjoyed this issue. It was very well done.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Okay, up next we have The Penguin, issue 10, Got a Light. Tom King as the writer, Rafael Della Torre on art, Marcelo Maiello on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. I know you've been digging this series. What do you think?
So I'm just waiting for it to pop up on the screen. All right. I'm happy to report that I continue to enjoy this series. I enjoy the series more than how I feel that Tom King is evolving the story on Wonder Woman. But I'm still loving his interpretation of the Penguin and the story he's telling here. Batman and Penguin continue to have this essentially love-hate relationship, but a sort of a mutually beneficial one. Penguin feeds Batman information about the mafia and the crime in Gotham, while Batman gets to catch more bad guys. And so Oswald Cobblepot to Batman is a necessary evil. And as much as Batman hates the fact that he knows that the Penguin is lying to him, he considers it almost a necessary evil, and he puts up with it. But meanwhile, Penguin is at war with his own children. Addison and Aiden Cobblepot have basically taken over the underworld, and Penguin has, in the previous 9 issues, assembled a team consisting of the Help, the 4th of July, the Black Spider, and others to essentially work behind the scenes in trying to overthrow his own children as the top mafiosos in Gotham City. And continued machinations exist play out in this issue, and I just think it's very, very well done. Uh, it's clear that Addison and Aiden are outclassed by the Penguin. Their father is simply better than them. He just simply is, at least in this story, and he handily continues to handily defeat them. And he makes at one point he speaks to his son Aiden, and as he's beating his son Aiden with his umbrella, he is making it very clear to his son that he's always thought of his children as beneath him, that he's not a typical father who wishes his children to be better than him, how we want our children to be better than us and surpass us. No, not Oswald Cobblepot. You're my child. You're going to be beneath me. Why? Because you're my child. That's his logic. That's how he feels. That's the degree of his narcissism. And he refines narcissism to an art form, and he imbues that, and he clearly views all of his relationships under the guise that everybody is beneath Oswald Cobblepot. The ultimate irony being that this is a 4 foot nothing criminal who looks like a penguin and wobbles like a penguin. And it's very interesting that at the end we have Addison Cobblepot, the daughter of the Penguin, actually going to Batman for help and making a proposal that we don't know what it is yet. And it's hilarious because obviously all of us who've been reading these 10 issues so far, we know that Batman knows exactly what Penguin's doing. And for her to ask for Batman's help, and clearly not knowing that Batman has a relationship with the Penguin, this really sort of ups the ante here, and it's particularly rewarding that we know how this series is likely going to end. At some point, Batman and Penguin are going to end up being trapped and drowning in the Batmobile in Gotham Harbor, which happened in the first issue with Batman asking Penguin at the end, "Oswald, how did you do this? What did you do?" And I'm curious as hell to see how this series wraps up over the next 2 issues. This issue continues to do what I wanted it to do, build up my excitement. It's been consistent, and it's done a good job of entertaining the hell out of me. And Tom King's been doing a really good job on this series. I wish I felt the exact same way on Wonder Woman, but that's not quite up to speed with me. But it's great that I've got at least one Tom King comic to absolutely love, and that's The Penguin. So what do you think?
It's so interesting, right? Because I feel the exact opposite. Loving Wonder Woman, this not as much. And that's not to say there's anything technically wrong with this book, right? It is called The Penguin. Should be the story of the Penguin and his children, if that's who he's feuding with and what have you. Batman shows up a little, and more in this issue than some of the others. And I did appreciate him, explaining, because that was one of the things that we've talked about. One of the things that some people haven't liked about the series is how Batman admitted that he was basically letting the Penguin get away with things. He wasn't holding the Penguin accountable in the way that he holds a lot of other villains accountable, because he was using the Penguin. Batman was using the Penguin to get information, and kind of played along and let the Penguin think that he was kind of putting one over on Batman. Turns out not the case. Batman knew all along what the Penguin was doing. So I appreciated that, because that was one of the things that bothered me. I was like, wait, the Penguin's able to trick Batman? I don't think so. It doesn't sound right. But Batman was aware all along, and he does in this issue express a little bit of regret. Like, maybe that wasn't the best thing to be doing in terms of, letting the Penguin get away with this kind of stuff and what have you. So yeah, I kind of wonder about that. But the reason I mentioned Batman not showing up so much, and this is a Penguin book, it's about the Penguin. It's about the Penguin. He's a villain. It's about his kids. They're villains. So my point is, there's not really anybody to root for in this book. Like the Penguin, and again, something else we've talked a lot about. Clearly DC, maybe it's because of the Colin Farrell TV show, the Matt Reeves Batman movie, whatever. For whatever reason, they want to raise the threat level, is the way I'm going to put it, of the Penguin. Now, Tom King's doing a very good job of that. Because the Penguin does seem scary. He beats his own kids here, and And what's also interesting is whenever someone sends people against the Penguin, he always manages to defeat him. Like, we're told that it's going to happen. We're told that people are going to go after the Penguin. They go after the Penguin off panel, and we always see the aftermath, and people are just like laying on the ground, and somehow the Penguin, short, fat, bald, has managed to defeat these people. Like, we're never shown how it happens. And granted, the Help is there. We know the Help is a very formidable fighter, what have you. But that's funny to me. It's like, you can't, because maybe you just can't with the Penguin, right? I mean, we do see him beat the crap out of his son with his umbrella, and we're told that his son may never even make a full recovery, or what have you. So again, we're told and we're shown the Penguin is a really bad guy. Okay, I get it. We're told, but not shown that he's a formidable guy. Okay, well, I sort of have to take my own advice here with what I've told you in the past, right? We can only go by, we have to believe what DC editorial tells us. And if they're telling me Penguin's a badass, I sort of have to believe it. Despite the fact that it doesn't necessarily ring that true that the Penguin is this, huge badass. But whatever, excuse me, I'll accept it. But the larger point that I'm trying to make about this being about the Penguin and subsequently about his children, and saying there's nobody likable here. There's nobody to root for here. I'm not rooting for the Penguin to kill his kids, but I'm not rooting for his kids to, win the day either. Like, there's nobody they're all bastards. There's nobody to root for. I don't like anybody. I like Batman, but he barely shows up. So, again, it's not for me. This is just not a book that I would, if it wasn't for the fact that we're, reading it to review, it's not a book that I would be reading. Like we talked about the Joker. Obviously, that's a villain title as well, but it's really more about Jim Gordon than it was about the Joker. This is the Penguin, and it's about the Penguin. It's not about anybody else. Again, his kids, and he's feuding with them or what have you. But it's kind of dreary and depressing or whatever. There's nobody redeeming in the book. There's nobody that's morally upstanding in the book for me to like root for. It's like a book of antagonists, all antagonists. There's no protagonist. So that's kind of, again, it's a very technically well done comic. The art's fantastic and it's very moody and what have you. It's what you would expect. But yeah, I'll take Wonder Woman over this any day of the week. So, but again, personal preference.
Yeah.
Okay, now here is a book that is very much full of hope. Primer number 3. And again, this is from the Primer YA graphic novel that came out a few years ago from writers Jennifer Murrow and Thomas Krajewski. And this is it's been divided up into 4 parts, or it's already in 4 chapters in the book. They've just taken each of those chapters and transposed them into a monthly comic. The art is by Greta Lusky. Letters are by Wes Abbott. So this is the 3rd installment, or the 3rd chapter. It's all hope. It's all very well done, very much aimed at a younger reader. And it succeeded in that because my daughter read it and loved it. And I can see why. The main character, Primer, as much as she has her flaws, her father's a criminal. He's in prison. She's an adopted kid. She goes behind her adopted parents' back in this issue and steals, or last issue actually, and has stolen these paints that her foster mother's company was developing. That is what actually gives her superpowers. So it's just, at the end of the day, it's a lot of fun. The art by Greta Lusky is really fantastic. When it's a book about a little girl who is also creative and does like to paint, but then she's using paints to give herself superpowers, and the book is called Primer, color is going to be a very important part of this book. And Greta Lusky doesn't let us down. She does a fantastic job with the color work. So I really can't recommend this highly enough. The only negative thing that I can say about this book is my daughter was after me for months and months and months to read it, and I never made the time. And that's to my stupidity. She knew better than me. This book's fantastic. So if you didn't get a chance, if you have a young reader in your family and they didn't get a chance to read this as an all-in-one, and you're getting a chance to pick up the singles, this is the kind of book that will make a comic reader. don't make a somebody read comics on a regular basis. So I think it's just fantastic. What are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
Uh, I, I I give it a very, very high compliment because this is a comic book that on the surface you would be wrong if you're assuming that, oh, this is for young adults. Well, I guess it's marketed to young adults, but a funny thing happened that it's actually written. I mean, it's actually written for it's adult. It's actually has an adult story. You can enjoy it as an adult. You and this is a young woman who's basically becomes her dad's in jail, and she has a foster family. She's got a terrible relationship with her father because her father's a jerk. She stands up to her father in this issue, but she struggles with that. It was her fault that in her father's eyes that he got caught in the first place because she never kicked a gun over to him. And this is adult. This is not like a child, like this isn't like a juvenile storyline where it's catering to, like, 10-year-old readers. No, this doesn't insult the reader. This is an adult story that that children can read and enjoy, and teenagers in particular can really enjoy. And it's funny. There's night knights that are the villains here that are kind of crazy. I particularly love. I even view that as having almost like a Dungeons and Dragons element. I love the fact that. The writer has taken the time to talk about the combinations of powers that Primer has. 4,450 combinations of free paints to use. I particularly love a page where it just shows Primer. She looks amazing with these bright colors on her skin, and she's just wearing jeans and she wears blue jeans, black boots, and basically like a wife, like a white muscle shirt, but she's got beautifully flamboyantly covered hair, perfectly in keeping with her power set, based on a set of paints, and the paints within the paint bottles and the paint tubes can regenerate themselves once you use up the paint. It's a great concept. It's a great idea. One of my favorite pages is one that consists of. It just shows all she writes down herself as a character in the story her 33 favorite awesome powers that she sort of came up with of how she can combine all the paints, and it educates the reader. So I can understand that first of all, I'm excited. I'm enjoying this as an adult, and I took the time to actually read that entire page. And if you're a kid and you're reading this, I can see particularly fascinated. Wow, I hope she uses the dark green power or the mahogany or number 8 or 10 or number 2 power green. And this is a story that pulls you into this story, and the story doesn't insult one's intelligence. The story doesn't talk down to the reader, and there's nothing worse. And we've seen this with DC Comics of late on some of their titles. I'm not going to name names, but the fact is, there's nothing worse than a title that supposedly that sort of speaks down to the reader and purports to assume that the reader is a child. Because comic books should be, if they're written properly, comic books that are written for all ages to enjoy, but can also be enjoyed by younger readers. That's the best kind of comic, and that's what this is. This is the best premiere of a DC character, hands down, in the last 10 years. I mean, compare this to what we got with Wonder Girl, Yara Flor. Oh my God. Compare this to Red Canary. Oh my God. This is what we need. It's no wonder that they've decided to make this 4 issues long. I want Primer in the mainstream DC universe. This is a character to watch, and I get more excited about it, particularly reading it. We're only at 3rd issues. This is the character to watch, and I say this with no hyperbole. This is probably and definitely one of my candidates for pick of the week, straight up.
Yeah, and there is supposed to be a second volume coming because it did very well. It did very well when it was marketed. And the first volume sold very well. So I'm not sure what the holdup is. I don't know why it's taken as long as it has to have the next volume come out. But yeah, we should be getting another volume this year. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. Okay, up next we have Power Girl. We're up to issue number 9, written by Leah Williams, pencils by Eduardo Pansica, letters by Julio Ferreira, colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr. Again, we're told this is a tie-in to House of Brainiac, but it's sort of tangentially. We basically get to see Power Girl team up with Crush and the Holiday Girls and try to take out the Zarnians that defected, I guess you'd say, or were stowaways from Brainiac's invasion into Metropolis. And I guess more power to him, right? Because we know that the ones that stayed aboard ship or that went back to the ship were were ultimately eaten by Queen Brainiac. So I guess it's a good thing that these ones stowed away after all. Um, but they're kind of holed up in a bar, and they're using weapons that can bring technology to life. And Crush and Power Girl have to team up to defeat them. But what's interesting is the virus that was the subject of the first story arc that infected the lion, the Kryptonian lion that was in Superman Zoo, is there as well, sort of stalking Power Girl, and he's in a protective mode, which is kind of interesting. Like, well, why would this guy who apparently seems to want Super or Power Girl dead? Why would he be helping out? Well, at the end, all is revealed, as it were. He says, that I won't let any harm come to Power Girl. The privilege of harming her is mine. So he's so obsessed. He's so consumed with being the one that defeats Power Girl, perhaps kills Power Girl, or at the very least harms her, that he's going to protect her from anyone else. So uh, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, briefly, apparently. But then it sounds like he's going to turn. But the art continues to be fantastic. But despite that, and despite the fact that, they've changed her name to Paige and they're trying to flesh her out or whatever, she still doesn't feel any different than Supergirl to me. This just as easy could be a Supergirl comic. There's nothing that's happened in this entire run in the first 9 issues where we could have just swapped it out for Supergirl. So I get that, when it was Earth 1 and Earth 2 and they want to differentiate and what have you, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, the characters are just too similar. They're blonde hair, they're blue eyes, they're female, they have Superman's power set, and they're from Krypton. You're never going to get away. You're never going to, in my mind, differentiate. I don't know how you would even do it. I don't even, like we say we don't like to play script doctor, whatever. I don't even putting on that cap, that script doctor hat. I don't know how you do it at this point. These two characters have been around for too long, and they're just too inherently similar. It's a huge challenge. So not to say this hasn't been enjoyable, but I don't see how this is any different than the Supergirl book in my mind. So anyway, maybe you feel differently. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I will say that DC is missing a Supergirl book, and there should always be a Supergirl book, and we got Power Girl. Now, I will disagree with you slightly, and I'm nitpicking here. I understand where you're coming from when you say this could be the story that Paige could be replaced with Kara, Supergirl, and no one would be none the wiser. I did kind of like the symbiote ship storyline, and while I got mixed feelings about the symbiote ship essence being sort of forming part of the lion, which was the pet in the Fortress of Solitude, that's a little bit wonky. I'll grant you that. But I sort of like the idea that the writer Leigh Williams was sort of exploring the Earth 2 origin and sort of bringing aspects of that into the story, but hasn't really gone far enough. And I will agree with you that one of the criticisms of this series is that, and just frankly, criticism of I'm going to just say it, every single female character in the DC universe right now, with few exceptions. They're just too nice. There's not enough flaws. There's Power Girl should be more aggressive. She should be drawn again. She's a sexual character. She should be drawn proportionately. Even the cover here, could be even more provocative than it is. Although I do like the allusion to Lobo with the "buy me fanboy" instead of "bite me fanboy." So I thought the cover's kind of cool. Crush should be more devious. Crush should be more badass than she is in here. This is Crush. Crush should be someone that we should be borderline not liking as a character, or enjoying to hate her, just like her father Lobo. But she's not. Why? Because it's all vanilla Sky. They're not flawed enough. I don't know what it is, but you're not writing Wonder Woman. Tom King is, and she's perfect over in that title. And that's not a put down. That's Wonder Woman. That's fine. But this is Power Girl. Show me some flaws. This is Crush. Show me some flaws. I mean, just get to it. I mean, Power Girl here having a roommate that reads minds, and I mean, just rock the boat a little bit. Nothing's rocking the boat. This is Power Girl. She has superpowers. She shouldn't have this astonishingly boring a life. And just throwing her into generic action like this is more could be done with this. And I don't what could that be? Well, I'm not sure. I'm not the writer, but this is sort of paint by the numbers to me. And it feels like there should be more here, and we're sort of treading water at this point. And even with the symbiote ship and this new sort of lion-like character, it's just wants revenge for reasons of just wanting revenge. It's not enough. It's missing some substance. It's missing substance here, and so I would substantially agree with most of your comments. We need a little bit more for Power Girl. There's just because this one it shows some semblance of actually going somewhere. It seems to like piddle out, but yeah, a little disappointing.
Yeah, and I would say as far as the symbiote ship stuff, I mean, you're right. That doesn't suit Supergirl's origin, but that's not anything that is inherent to the character. That's something that happened to her. So if you want to, swap out the symbiote ship, you could just as easily say that what happened with this, symbiote ship or whatever, that just as easily could have happened to Supergirl as Power Girl. There's nothing inherent in that the symbiote ship storyline that has to make it apply to Power Girl instead of Supergirl. You know what I'm saying? So again,
yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that this is a dilemma, right? That the characters are so similar that it's hard to differentiate because I think they are different. And again, I don't know what the answer is, but I wish it were simpler. But the problem is now it's like, okay, we'll go back and change Power Girl, give her a different name, give her a different look, give her a different hair color, whatever. And you have a subset of fans that's their favorite character, and you're arbitrarily changing Power Girl, and that's not really fair to them. So anyway, first world problems. Let's move on. Detective Comics, we're up to 1085. It's crazy to think we're on 1085 of Detective Comics. It doesn't seem that long ago that we were celebrating the 1000th issue of Detective Comics, and here we are. I mean, granted, it was coming out for twice a month for a long time, but anyway, written by Ram V, art is by Stefano Raphael, colors by Lee Luffridge, letters by Ariana Mayer. I like where this is going now that Batman is back and working with Jim Gordon to try to retake Gotham from the Orgum family. I don't know that I necessarily like the new look Batman has, where like he's got his hands wrapped in bandages and he's got like this bloody bat painted on the middle that's like dripping. It's a strange look or what have you. But the fact that he is taking a much more active role in what's going on, I do appreciate, because he was missing from the title for so long. So I like that. The Mr. Freeze characterization from Ramvi, I like. What I don't like, just again, is how long it's just taken this story to unfold. I feel like we're literally a year behind. We're finally starting to move forward again with some action, but sometimes I struggle to stay interested because this story has just gone on for so long. It feels like 50 issues at this point that this story's been going on. I just can't wait to get to the end of it. I get you want to tell this big, long Magnus Opum type story, but there's not enough new here to justify, in my mind, the length of how long this has taken. So, but it does feel like the action's ramping up. The artwork is very good. The backup is outstanding. We'll talk about that in a second. But give us your thoughts on the main story.
Yeah, I actually don't mind the new symbol for Batman on his chest. One of the things that's quite clear here is Ram V. For those who maybe haven't been paying attention to this story, this absolutely is a story that's insular, and if do not confuse or try to make sense make sense of this long, long story that Ram V has told. With what's going on in the pages of Batman and the Trip Zdarsky, they're very definitely separate tales, and I'm glad that's the case because I've been. I do consider this Ram V story. I know it's sort of a cliche analogy, and I've used it before, but this has grown on me like a fine wine. I'm not a wine drinker, but every now and then, if I start drinking wine and I keep on drinking it, I'll be glad I did by the end of the night, and then I'll regret it in the morning. Hopefully in the morning I won't regret reading this when this is all said and done. I don't think I will. I've been enjoying this. One thing that Ramvi does, he introduces a lot of concepts, and it can get a little frustrating because it's sort of like he shovels a lot on you. But then what happens is every 5 or 6 issues, then he spreads the dirt, and it's easier to see the bigger picture, and that's what works for me and keeps pulling me back. So he dumps a lot of story on me, but then he pulls back, and I see the picture, and then by doing so, it pulls me back in, and that's happened about 4 or 5 times. So I have gone back and forth in my reviews. I've absolutely gone back and forth with feeling some frustrations, but then also being, wow, this is awesome. And so I've been up and down. I'm like a cardiogram on this, like a evidence of a cardiac arrest multiple times. But this issue, I really liked how Catwoman approaches Joker in this issue, and I love how Catwoman very cleverly gets the Joker's attention by telling the Joker, how come you know Batman's back? You know he was dead. I mean, you're letting the Orgum family take all the, you're letting the Orgum family cause all this pain to Batman. Why are you doing that? You realize that the Orgum family is all about order, right? They're more about, Batman and the Orgum family are both different forms of order. And the Orgum family thrive on order even more than Batman does. And you're the embodiment of chaos, and you've done nothing. And like Catwoman just lets that comment rest there and just leaves. So that, one thing about, Ram V did a great job writing Catwoman in the Catwoman series on his run. And I really like how he scripts Catwoman here in understanding fundamentally how to get the Joker's attention, and does a really good job here. And I like how Batman approaches Dr. Freeze, Mr. Freeze, and says to Mr. Freeze, look, Gotham might not need me anymore. But let me tell you something, Mr. Freeze, if your wife Nora, she doesn't need you anymore, but if she told you she needed her help and you knew she needed your help, would you not help her? And that sort of pulls Mr. Freeze in, saying, okay, how can I help you out? So he's got him on his side. Scarecrow is recruited by the Orgum family. And it looks like the Orgum family, the Orgum Queen, is trying to resurrect somebody. I'm not sure if it's going to be her son Arzen she's trying to resurrect, or if it's her husband, the former king, which I don't think it's her husband because she killed him. And she also killed her son, so I'm not sure who she wants to resurrect here. It's somebody is encased and is sort of mummified here, so I'm not sure who the Orgum King wants to resurrect. But anyways, it's interesting. In the meanwhile, we know that the case against Shavad, who orchestrated the death of that lieutenant, whose central mystery was addressed by the Question and Rene Montoya in early issues, that's coming to a head as well. And it's revealed that Batman has a new Batcave. He's got a new hidden Batcave here, which is sort of symbolic of his new symbol. So he's got a new hidden Batcave because apparently he's got of course, Batman would have multiple Batcaves hidden all over the city. And it's sort of I think his symbol, the red symbol, is sort of symbolic of the new Batcave as well. At least that's what I'm reading into it. I might be wrong on that, but I like to play a little bit of mental gymnastics as I read this. Ram V does that to us readers. I can do it right back. So I enjoyed it, and it continues to build to a crescendo. That's the name of the actual story in this issue, is Crescendo. And yeah, so I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, and I'm even more curious to hear your thoughts on the backup. So...
Yeah, the backup really shows what a bastard Mr. Freeze is, right? He meets up with a woman that has shown up at various times during his career from the earliest days. And she certainly considers him a friend and a mentor. He's helped her out over the years, and she asks for his help again. And he gives her this recipe, this concoction that's supposed to help her. She's complaining about moving to DC and being a lobbyist, and feeling outclassed because everybody's younger than her and more energetic or what have you. Um, and so, yeah, he writes down this formula or whatever and says, best taken on an empty stomach. And as he's walking away, he says, she finds it odd that the elixir of youth I've given her is basically a witch's brew of household chemicals. Um, and yeah, at the end, we see that she put this together, drank it, and basically poisoned herself. Like her whole bottom half of her face is all rotted away, eaten away by whatever and so all throughout, it was like we were led to believe, um, by Alex Packnadel, the writer, that hey, there's still some compassion, there's still some humanity left in Victor Freeze. Well, come to find out, could not be further from the truth. So I don't know if there is going to be more Mr. Freeze moving forward, and this is just a reminder of what a despicable bastard he is, or if it's just kind of a one of. But the art by Christopher Mitten, very well suited for the story. Triona Farrell does the colors. Steve Wan's on letters. Just brutal. Just a reminder of how brutal Mr. Freeze is. There is no compassion in him. He can talk about his beloved Nora all along, but really that's just an excuse to allow him to do whatever he wants to do, as we saw in his One Bad Day story, which was very well done. So what are your thoughts on the backup?
Well, I got sort of mixed feelings about the backup. I think it's dare I say there might be more than just the surface level. Mr. Freeze is a bastard. Well, of course he's a bastard. On the other hand, I'm wondering if I got the impression, because this character, this Magna character that he meets, he's got a history with her going back to his early years when he was, before he really became a full-fledged villain, and meeting up with her again, she sort of talks about, she's somebody who always helps people. She cares about the people of Gotham. She cares about Mr. Freeze, and she always believed there was hope for Victor Freeze to better himself, and she was always on his side, and she's clearly someone who is prepared to see the world through his eyes to better understand him. And I mean, you couldn't ask for more from another person that you just occasionally run into from now and then. I mean, there's nothing better than what makes a best friend. A best friend is somebody that you can meet 2 or 3 years. You can go years without seeing them. When the minute you meet them, there's some empathy there. They can understand you. And Magna almost comes across like that character that Victor Freeze could understand. And as I'm reading it, I'm getting that sense. And then I got the sense that Victor was very disappointed when, out of the blue near the end, Magna says that she's feeling old. She's a little upset. She's down that she cares so much about people, but she doesn't get a sense that a lot of her kindness is given back to her. And so she's just feeling tired. She's feeling that all her coworkers are younger than her. And she basically is asking him for a little bit of a pick-me-up. She actually says, she knows he's a scientist. Do you have a pick-me-up or something that can make me feel younger? And I don't know if maybe that disappointed Victor. He interpreted that, I think, that, oh, you're just giving up. You're just like everyone else. Rather than stay in the good fight, you just want to take the easy way out. And so he writes down a bunch of household chemicals, and she takes it and she dies. And it on the one hand, it's clear that maybe Mr. Freeze wanted to kill her. On the other hand, he never forced her to take it. He just wrote down a bunch of household chemicals. He even hinted at being a little bit surprised. He says if she finds it odd that the elixir of youth recipe I've given her is a witcher's brew of household chemicals, she doesn't show it. In other words, he didn't try to hide the fact that he was basically telling her to ingest kitchen chemicals found in, under the kitchen sink, or at least that's the implication. So, it makes me wonder, did she commit suicide? And suicide by not, instead of, you heard about suicide by cop, this is suicide by Mr. Freeze. So I'm wondering if it's a little bit more complicated than just Freeze being a jerk, because this Magda state of mind I call into question as well. So I got sort of mixed feelings on it, but I actually thought it was very well done. It actually, because no matter which interpretation I get, I'm still impressed, and I kind of like this potential a-hole version of Mr. Freeze. I like him being a little bit more hardcore, because I've been on this kick in the last year, is that I want more evil in the DC universe, more unapologetic flaws and unapologetic evil, and we're getting it. At least that's what it looks like. So, Oh, you're on mute, my friend.
Yeah, he's a bastard any way you slice it. Again, I think that One Bad Day story illustrates that perfectly. So, okay, next up we have the DC Pride one shot for 2024. There's a ton of stories here. Hello, Space Boy. Al Ewing is the writer. Stephen Byrne on art. Aditya Bidikar on letters, starring the blue version of Starman, the one we saw most recently in Danger Street from Tom King. We've got The Rivers and the Lakes That You're Used to by Ngozi Ukazu. She's the writer and the artist. Letters by Lucas Catoni. Hope you all had a chance to listen to my conversation with her about her upcoming Barda YA graphic novel. But here she's telling a Jackson Hyde story, which is pretty fun. Then we have Marasmius from Gretchen Felker Martin is the writer. Claire Rowe is the artist. Triona Farrell on colors. Aditya Bidikar on letters. That's a Poison Ivy story. Then we've got Stealing Time from Jamila Rouser as the writer. O'Neill Jones on art. Jody Troutman on letters. That's a Natasha Irons and Tracy 13 story. We've got Bros Down in A-Town from Jarrett Williams, most recently coming off of his Speed Force mini, which we really didn't care for. DJ Kirkland is the artist. Lucas Catoni on letters. That's John Kent, his boyfriend, Bunker, and the Ray. I'm drawing a blank. What? Remind me, John Kent's boyfriend's name?
Jay Nakamura.
Jay Nakamura, that's right. Yeah. Lessons in Astral Projection is a dreamer story from Nicole Maines as the writer. Jordan Gibson is the artist. Ariana Mero on letters. Phantom Rodeo from Calvin Kalsuki. Len Gogao is the artist. Marisa Louise on colors. Morgan Martinez and Admiral Design do the letters. That's a Circuit Breaker story. Circuit Breaker from the kind of the Flash family. Jay Garrick's in that one as well. The Strange Case of Harleen and Harley, which is an excerpt from the upcoming YA graphic novel from Melissa Marr as the writer. Jen St. Ange is the artist. Jeremy Lawson on colors. Lucas Catoni on letters. And then finally, Space from Phil Jimenez as the writer. Guillaume Marcion is the artist, and Frank Sedovic does the letters. Then we've got pinups. There's a Robin pinup called Red by Robin Zombie Higginbottom. Orange, and again, these are all based on colors of the Pride flag. Orange by Chloe Brailsford. That one is Andy Curry. We've got Yellow by Ego Rodriguez, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a quick peek because I don't remember who the yellow one is. Who is in the yellow one?
The yellow one is by Ego Rodriguez.
Yep. But who's the character that's in it?
Oh, Catman, and I think that's Thunder or Lightning. That's
yeah, Black Lightning's kid, and then we've got Green by Helen Mask with Pied Piper and Connor Kent. Then next up after that,
not Connor Kent. That's
Connor Hawk.
Connor Hawk. Yeah.
We've got Blue by Valentina Smith with Obsidian and Bluebird. And then we've got, let me get there. Sorry, scrolling as fast as I can. Then we've got the Purple by Bailey Rosalind with
I think
Galaxy.
It's Galaxy. Yeah.
Yep, with Galaxy. And Jericho, I think, is the other character in that one. Jericho from the Titans. And then finally, there's one more. Let me get there. Is there one more, or is that the last one?
I think that's the last one. I can't find another one.
Yeah, I guess that is the last pinup. Okay, so we're gonna go through again. We've done a spotlight on this. We're just gonna go through quickly, and if we have any thoughts. This Hello Space Boy from Al Ewing, Stephen Byrne with Starman. I think it's good in terms of it gives sort of a lot of ancillary information without feeling like an info dump on who this version of Starman is.
Yeah,
it's completely different from the Starman of like James Robinson or the Starman you may be more familiar with from the Legion of Superheroes. So it's pretty interesting in that way to give us some background and history of the planet Tradlavia, where he's from, and kind of how things went down and whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's Al Ewing. As far as I know, this is the first Al Ewing DC work. He's mostly known for his Marvel work, but there's also nothing memorable here. It's a little bit of a forgettable story, but I will say the Stephen Byrne art is fantastic. So I thought
Yeah.
that one was okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the Ngozi Ukazu story, Jackson Hyde. Again, it's the art is fantastic. I really like her artistic style. I think it's a very welcoming style. But again, there's nothing long lasting here, other than Jackson Hyde and whoever his boyfriend is. I can't even remember his name. They clearly care about each other. Okay, great. Beyond that, like, there's nothing here to really kind of latch onto that's going to make it, in my mind, memorable. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, I thought that I like seeing Orion pop up.
Yeah.
I that was, I have to say, that was a surprise, and I never saw that coming, and yeah, so it was. I thought it was, I thought it was interesting, and again, we made this comment before. I mean, these Pride stories, they're, you know, the stories which I find more enjoyable, and I think they're maybe slowly, gradually getting better, and they're in terms of that these stories need to focus on telling a good story that happen to star and happen to just star LGBT characters and don't make the sexuality the centerpiece of the story, and that way they're frankly, because that's the way they should be told, and these characters will get more respect that way. That flies in the face of actually calling the compilation and anthology Pride. So it's a double-edged sword there, but but stories like this, it's clear that there's a lot of quality that went into this story, and the art's good, and there's a wide variety of characters in this story, as well as the whole compilation as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. But it is a double edged sword, right? Because you're going to have people that this may be the only comic they buy all year, and they're going to want to feel represented. So, in that way, you do want to focus on the sexuality. But readers
Yeah.
like us, again, I'm not identifying with these characters. I'm not homosexual, so I can see, I can see it both ways. That being said, if you want to tell a good story, it this was my favorite until the next one. We'll talk about it when we get to the end and what have you. But man, the Poison Ivy and Janet from HR in this Marasmus story, and they're on this planet called Marasmus, and it's there's a lot of plant life, and it's a deep space galactic trading hub port world that they're on. And Poison Ivy's there to trade for some exotic plants, and she's brought these mushrooms or what have you. And what's interesting is there are people, there are like our protesters there on this planet, and clearly, they're based on the very intolerant, conservative, whatever. And they're there with their bullhorn and freaks, and they're preaching against, same sex, and it's a groom and it's children, and bride and a groom, and mother, father, blah blah blah. And just preaching their intolerance, which to me, like, dude, what are you wasting your time? Like, you think people care on other planets? Like, it goes back to the first story that we're talking about with Starman and the Tradlavians that didn't care about gender. You just were with whoever you were attracted to or whatever. And so Poison Ivy, she sort of pranks them, as it were, to to give them a little bit of their own comeuppance. And then at the end, they get the authorities and they sick the authorities on Poison Ivy. And so then instead of just pranking them, she goes farther and she exposes them to the mushrooms, a toxic level of the mushrooms, so that they're going to die, but it's a slow, painful death, and they have they have horrific dreams. She says, I gave them 30 times the safe dosage. They're going to see a lot of things, wonderful, terrible things, and they're going to die screaming. And maybe it's just the vindictiveness in me that I have for people that are so intolerant, that preach like, religion and, God is love and all that sort of thing. But yet they're so intolerant. There's like, I'm a live and let live kind of guy. If you're living your life and what you're doing is not hurting anyone else, then do whatever. I don't care. Identify as a mushroom yourself. I don't care. Identify as a rocket ship. Identify as a business card. I literally don't care what you identify with as. Identify as a Ford Mustang. I don't care. It doesn't affect my life. and the people that preach all this, oh, God said this and God said that, blah blah blah. Like, I went to Catholic school for 13 years or whatever. I know the Bible, I know what it says, and at the end of the day, it was judge not lest ye be judged, and love one another as I love you. That's it. End of story. They
Right.
didn't say love one another as I have loved you unless they're gay, or unless you don't agree with them politically or whatever.
Yeah.
So I have zero patience and zero tolerance for people that are intolerant of others, right? Like, it's sort of ironic. The one thing that I'm not tolerant of is people that are actively out there harming others, campaigning for legislation to keep people from, having the same rights and, whatever. That's the one thing I'm like, I say, live and let live. But again, that's the one thing I'm not tolerant of. And so I love, like, when I saw these people get their comeuppance at the end, when not only are they going to die a horrible death, they're going to die screaming, but they're having these illusions. Like, specifically these characters in the story were preaching against any sort of same-sex relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And the visions that were shown is that they are, engaged in, like, the woman's kissing another woman or whatever. Like, what just horrific,
Yeah.
like the most horrific death you could imagine for these people. And all I could think was, hell yeah, there's some
Yeah.
justice right there. Hell yeah.
Well,
So
and
it's
yeah.
completely vindictive or whatever, but I was like, hell yeah, give it
Yeah.
to them. Talk it to
And
them.
I agree. It's funny because you and we've had this ongoing dialogue when we review Poison Ivy about our general preferences, or at least mine. I prefer an evil Poison Ivy. I like her darker side. I find her more interesting that way, and I feel like J. Willow-Wilson is sort of like was softening her up a bit in the series. And then I read this, and this is a lot more hardcore. This is something that I expect Poison Ivy to do. Make no mistake. Poison Ivy does not have a justification to make them die a slow, horrible death just because they happen to have a point of view and they're bigots. I don't think they deserve the death that Poison Ivy did, but it's in keeping with the Poison Ivy that I know and love. I expect Poison Ivy to do exactly what she did in this issue. There's a part of me that says, yeah, it's poetic justice. No question about the poetry and the justice she inflicts upon them. But this is hardcore, brutal, terrorist-like reaction. This is what happens when you piss off Poison Ivy. I mean, it's one thing if you step on a plant. It's quite another if you attack her entire sexuality and ridicule and bigotry. And these people did go all the way to another planet to preach their bigotry. And I mean, good Lord, they couldn't have picked the timing couldn't have been worse for them because they, of course, ran into Poison Ivy. And it's funny. There's, Janet from HR just sort of like sits back and she doesn't. She seems to obviously have no issue with the with what went on. But it's interesting. It actually makes me wonder if, okay, well, maybe Poison Ivy is going to remain really hardcore and evil and badass, because I kind of like this harder core Poison Ivy. And even though part of me, I think maybe it's a little bit at odds with J. Willow-Wilson's interpretation, but maybe it isn't. And regardless, I like it. I quite enjoyed that story.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not condoning, violence or
Yeah,
killing people in real life. In real life, this
I
is
know that.
pages of a comic, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things that's great about comics, right? Like, cathartically, I can be like, oh, it's nice to see some bigots get some justice coming their way.
Mm.
Yeah, the Natasha Irons and Tracy 13 story. I'm not invested in these characters. I'm not invested in their previous relationship or what have you. So for me, that one was, kind of forgettable. I will say that the art, it's very light on the background. Like, the backgrounds in this one are very light. But I did appreciate that the person that drew it did have a chance. O'Neill Jones did have a chance to mess with a little bit of fashion, because a lot of times they go hand in hand. Like, it's an interest that it seems like a lot of homosexual artists have, that they love to do fashion and different outfits and what have you. So it's Tracy 13. She's having like a birthday party, so people are dressed up, and O'Neill Jones gets to do that. So I appreciated that. The Bros Down in A-Town by Jarrett Williams is probably the one story that I just flat out didn't like. Most of the other stories I liked, or I really liked, or I loved, but this one, again, like forgettable. And I think part of it just leans so far into the flamboyance, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. And I guess you want a variety when you're telling these type of stories for the LGBTQ community. But this one was the one that was like super flamboyant and just felt, even though all the characters in it are male, it had like a real feminine vibe to it. It just felt awkward. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just not the audience for it. Um, but they're kind of like geeking out over different foods that they're eating from different planets or whatever. And even the art style felt very cartoony and didn't really work for me. So yeah, this one was, it was a bit of a struggle to get through this one.
Yeah.
I will say that the parts of the story where the Ray was feeling uncomfortable, it's clear of the four of these guys who are either gay or bisexual, he's the one who's least comfortable with his coming out and with identifying with that. And so, like, I kind of wish the story had focused more on that because that was interesting and I felt there was value there. But the rest of it just felt like it felt like fluff, and again, kind of forgettable. The best thing about the story was the color work. I thought the color work was really outstanding. That was very bright and vibrant. So the story is kind of fun, um, and lighthearted or what have you, but it didn't speak to me at all. Where some of the other stories kind of spoke to me, and it felt like there was a lot more value to them. So, anything to add about that
Yeah.
one?
No, I would just say that I thought it was a little bit too, well, to be quite blunt, there's an audience for this, and and I'm sure you would acknowledge that the very flamboyancy which would sort of turn me off, and that was you're not a big fan of. That's precisely the type of flamboyancy that some readers it speaks to some readers that would read this Pride anthology, and so I acknowledge that, and so it's really I get it, and I agree with you that the more substance filled, what I got more out of that story was was Starman as well, like that coming out or that that struggle that
The Ray.
the race, sorry, yeah, and I'm not a Jay Nakamura fan. I'm the guy that's always joking that I want John Kent to break up with Jay and go with Saturn Girl since he's bisexual. I'm still waiting for that to happen, but that's my bias, and because he's bisexual, there's no reason why I can't have John Kent and Saturn Girl in a story in a DC Pride. But maybe I'll have to wait to 2025 for that. But that's my holdout.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest. Like as time has gone on, I've liked Jay less and less. It doesn't have anything to do with him being a guy or a girl. I just don't find him to be particularly interesting. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you know, I like John Kent as a character. I think he could do better. It's kind of disparaging to the Jay Nakamura, but come on, dude, you're Superman's son. You can date somebody who's like just I don't know. Not that Jay's not ambitious or whatever. Like maybe he hasn't had the
Yeah.
right writer to kind of flesh him out as a character a little more. So anyway, the Dreamer story that's up next by Nicole Maines with art by Jordan Gibson. I loved it. It shows once again that Nicole Maines is maybe the only writer I want writing Dreamer. Not just because she portrayed not anything to do with her portraying Dreamer, in live action TV and kind of the Arrowverse or CW, what have you. She just understands the character so well, and I love that they're fleshing out Dreamer as a character even more, because this one kind of gives hints about how most of the people from her planet, the only power they have is kind of this precognition that comes to them in their dreams, and how Dreamer is so much more than that, as we've seen in the pages of Suicide Squad, and how he's trying to discover what's going on. If I have any nitpick about this story, I thought the art by Jordan Gibson, the backgrounds were just a little light at times. The depiction of Dreamer herself is done really well, but especially in the early pages, it just felt like something was missing. Um, but I think overall, it was a great story. I find myself becoming a big fan of the Dreamer as a character, and wanting to know more about her and wanting to see her fleshed out more. So it's going to be interesting when the Dreamer is finally written by somebody other than Nicole. If I still feel that way, so we'll see. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't have much to add. To be honest, I sort of like skim read it. It didn't. Admittedly, it wasn't my favorite. It didn't really stand out to me, but it it was good. I agree with you, Nicole Maines. She's I got to admit she's completely surprised me. I've said this before. I wasn't expecting much from Nicole Maines. She's proven me wrong. She's stuck up to the plate. I'm enjoying her Suicide Squad. You're right. Every time she writes Streamer, she does do a good job, whether it's in an anthology like this, even with the art that I think is a little juvenile here. The writing does stand out. I do feel that it has the sort of substance that she has brought to the character in the mainstream DC universe, and I'm assuming this is probably mainstream in continuity as well. Although it didn't like artistically feel that way, but that's just my own particular stylistic artistic bias. But yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, I have little to say about the next one, Phantom Rodeo, with the script by Calvin Kosulki. I remember when this character showed up before that the story felt very messy. This feels very messy as well. Um, at least he's trying to tie it in with what's going on currently in the Flash, because when Jay Garrick shows up, he's talking to Circuit Breaker about what's going on in the pages of Flash, and it even says at the end that the adventure continues in Flash number 10. So we know how messy the story that's being told in the Flash is. So I guess that's an excuse to make this one super messy. But I didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't really care for the art. I thought the art and even the colors were just muddled. And so it didn't, the art didn't pull me in such a way that I was like, well, maybe I'm not getting it. Let me go reread it a second time. There was nothing in the story that made me want to go back and have to reread it again. And I didn't really get it, didn't really understand what was going on. But again, the art didn't impress me. So I was like, I do not want to read that again. I just didn't get it. I'm going to move on. So I don't know. Maybe it's on me that I missed something. But yeah, it's kind of sad because the Flash and the speedsters of the DCU, those used to be my favorite characters. And I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a Flash story that I was reading. Well, probably the last time Jeremy Adams wrote one, right?
Yeah.
Because we had Speed Force from Jarrett Williams that neither of us cared for, and we're certainly not enjoying the Flash by Si Spurrier. So it's kind of sad.
Yeah, I would add to that I think Circuit Breaker was a definitely a misfit as a character. It's not a good fit into the Flash universe, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that he's LGBTQ. It's nothing to do at all. It's just his power set. I still don't understand it. He's like a walking, breathing Si Spurrier Flash story, because what power does he have? He connects to the Still Force, but he somehow absorbs the Speed Force, and then he can channel that into energy, and then and he's a character that whenever I see him, the reason why, I mean, I never. It's another character whose power set is rendered impossible for any artist to draw, and that's why I don't like it. It just doesn't. It's just, how do you conceptualize that to make it interesting? And it's just, he's just not interesting. As his power set's not interesting, and so I'm not interested in him as a character. And at the end of the day, him talking to Jay Garrick, and then I really have to say the reference to Flash number 10, given how confusing, how convoluted the Flash run has been. I don't see many people hopping. I don't want Circuit Breaker to show up in Flash number 10. There's enough players in there as there is. I mean, Matt, that's insane. I mean, anyways, that's a rant for Flash number 10.
Yeah, and then Strange Case of Harleen and Harley. I don't have much to say. I like the art. I liked the interaction between the two, but it does feel like such incomplete, because again, it's just a sneak preview of the graphic novel that's coming later, as opposed to these others, which are made for the amount of space that they have. You can argue or have opinions on how well they're a complete story in the limited amount of pages they have. This one's not meant to be a complete story at all. It's just like reading a couple of preview pages. So I can't judge it at all based on the merits. I like the art. I like the interaction between the two characters of Harley and Harleen, but I guess we'll see. I will say that if you're not understanding this Harley is obviously Harley Quinn. The Harleen is Ivy. It's Poison Ivy. She even says at the end, "I'm going to call you Ivy because I like when your arms are wrapped around me." So clearly, this is like a young, sort of a young love story between Harley and Poison Ivy. So if that's your cup of tea, you probably should look for that YA graphic novel coming later. So, any thoughts on that one?
Uh, Only that I get it. Harley Quinn. There's a they're capitalizing on Harley and Harley Quinn because their names and it's this is clearly a corporate direction that they want to go, hoping to capitalize on it. I'm not. I'm it's definitely not for me. I think to me this is about a 10 and an 11-year-old girls who have affection toward each other, and I actually think it's a little bit. It was a little bit kind of. I just thought it was a little bit. I don't want to say creepy. I just thought it wasn't. It just seemed to, it just seems odd. It just seems really kind of odd. This isn't if Harleen is Ivy, why muddy the waters like that? It just this isn't Harley. This is once again really a completely different iteration of Harley, a completely different iteration of Ivy. Now it's Harleen, and it's another example of muddying the waters, muddying the interpretation, watering down the intellect, the IP, and I might have an outlier opinion on that, but I don't like every time they take yet another step outside the boundaries of these characters because they're afraid of taking chances with the interpretations of the characters they already have. But I'm sure I'm in the minority on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sell really well. It's completely out of continuity. It's its
Yeah,
own
fair
thing.
enough.
So I don't really have a problem. Although I did find it strange at the end when when I read that line, "I'm going to call you Ivy," because I had no idea. I was like, "Wait, that girl's Ivy? Like, why are you calling her Harleen? Like, that makes no sense." But
Yeah.
anyway, moving on to saving the best for last here. Spaces, written by Phil Jimenez, art by Gioli Massioni. Oh my God, this was, you know, I think the part of the reason that this hit me so hard is because I know Phil. I know what kind of guy he is. I've interviewed him. He's been on the show, and for him to be vulnerable the way that he is, this is kind of like an autobiography of him talking about how different he felt when he was little and how he sort of escaped into fantasy worlds where he felt more at ease and where he felt more welcomed. Um, I just thought it was incredible. And I thought the artwork was absolutely phenomenal. It really captured kind of the emotion um, and the vulnerability that Phil showed. So last year during DC Pride, there was a Kevin Conroy story. And if you're going, Kevin Conroy, why does that name sound familiar? The voice of Batman, right? The one that did a Batman animated series, Batman voice, and really for a lot of people was Batman for a whole generation, and did other things, and even got to do live action playing Bruce Wayne in a few things, and unfortunately passed away last year. But a lot of people weren't aware that he was gay, that he was homosexual, and he had a story where he was vulnerable last year in the DC Pride that anthology that he wrote, talking about his struggle and his life and the way it affected. Because again, like this guy was much older than Phil Jimenez, and so a lot more bigotry, less acceptance back then when he was first trying to have a career as an actor in Hollywood and having to keep that secret and what have you. Well, it got nominated for an Eisner last year, and I believe it won for like best short story or single story or something like that. Like completely deserving. All I could think when I was done reading this was again just how proud I was of Phil for being this vulnerable and just what an incredible job he did, and how much I respect him as an artist and a person. How glad I am that I've gotten to know him. And I can't. This will get nominated for an. This has to get nominated for an Eisner. I can't imagine this doesn't get nominated. It's so well done. It's so amazing. It makes me appreciate Phil. I mean, Phil is a fantastic storyteller and a fantastic artist, and this just makes me love his work that much more. again, showing the vulnerability and the emotion and hearing some of his backstory and what have you. And some of the stuff I knew, some I didn't. I just thought it was phenomenal. And again, a story that shows the power of the medium in such a fantastic way. Um, like, I don't know how you read the story and you're not a fan of Phil Jimenez. Like, I don't necessarily mean, hey, you love every story he's written or every comic he's drawn or whatever, but just a fan of him as a like, he's such a great person. He has such a big heart. He's so welcoming and inclusive um, and grateful and humble. And I mean, if he won the Eisner last year for Best Artist for his work on the first issue of Wonder Woman Historia, you want to know who Phil is? Just go to YouTube and Google that, like, Phil Jimenez Eisner win or whatever, and watch his reaction when he wins and goes up there and gives his speech. He's so humble and touched and emotional and what have you, and it sums him up perfectly. So I can't say enough about this story. Like, worth the price of admission alone in my mind to pick up DC Pride just for this story. Like, absolutely amazing. It completely blew me away. So, what were your thoughts on it?
I just I loved it that it was also a tribute of his love for Wonder Woman, and it speaks to the power of comics because just as a young for me, it started off with Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. I was lost in the imagination. I saw myself as a young Superboy, and Phil saw himself, and he saw the queer side of himself. He saw that revered in the pages of Wonder Woman. And comic books are for everyone, and what the power of comics speaks for itself with that. Even though the majority of the history of comics is such that the LGBTQ have not been given their due, the fact is that in the pages of Wonder Woman, what she stands for, what the heroes stand for, even though it wasn't overtly and expressly shown in the past through the majority of the last 7 decades, the fact is that what the ideals that are embodied by the comic book superheroes, in this case Wonder Woman, still managed to inspire. And he talks about entering spaces and wanting to fill those spaces and getting that voice. And he becomes an artist and one of the best in the business. I mean, people look at his gorgeous art on Wonder Woman Historia. I mean, the passion and the skill that went into that, absolutely gorgeous. And this is a guy who, to explore that metaphor, and it's clear in the way he tells this story. The dialogue in this story is amazing. He talks about filling that space with himself, and for him, his being queer, that filling that space with that and giving voice to that is a large part of who he is, and a large part of the inspiration that he got from reading from Wonder Woman. And he talks about how he's been able to fill that space, and how he's even gotten to make his own. And in those spaces, he says, I've been able to create stories that have lasted a generation, find purpose when I didn't think I had one anymore, love whom I wanted and how with abandon. They haven't been perfect, but they've been paradise. And that's how that ends. And that's just the coup de grace of just a wonderful synopsis of what led him down a path to being one of the most revered and with no exaggeration, one of the best artists in comic books. And it was absolutely the best story in this compilation, and so appropriately named spaces, and well done. And interestingly enough, the art by Giulio Massioni, very well done as well. The backgrounds are incredible. You talked about some of the earlier stories not having the background. This was absolutely gorgeous, and particularly the renderings of Paradise Island and Wonder Woman, and did a good job of rendering Phil Jimenez as well.
Yeah, and I apologize. I don't know that I'm pronouncing that name correct. It might be Julio. It might be soft G, whatever. But regardless, does the color work as well, which is also really interesting. It's a limited color palette, and yeah, it just works perfectly. So anyway, last book we're going to talk about in detail. Batman Brave and the Bold, issue number 13. There's 5 stories in here. Nightwing and Deadman Down the Road, Part 1, from writer Tim Seeley, Kelly Jones on art, Michelle Madsen on colors, Rob Lee on letters. Time Jerks Part 1 from writer Mark Russell. John McKell is the artist. Mike Spicer on colors. Farron Delgado on letters. The end of the Artemis story. Artemis the Poison Within, Part 4. Delilah S. Dawson, writer. Serge Acuna, artist. Matt Herms, colors. Dave Sharp, letters. The Invader, Part 1. Joshua Hale Fialkov is the writer. Lissandro Esterin is the artist. Patricio Delpesh on colors and Becca Carey on letters. And then a black and white story, Perp Walk from Jason Sean Alexander. Plot and art. Rodney Barnes does the scripting. Tom Napolitano on letters. So give us your thoughts on Nightwing and Deadman, Rocky.
Nightwing and Deadman, written by Tim Seeley, art by Kelly Jones. Well, the first thing I love about it is Kelly Jones. It's always great when Kelly Jones, whenever I have an opportunity to read a Kelly Jones rendered Batman story, who would pass that up? Or a Batman family related. And this dealing with Nightwing and Deadman. Nightwing and Deadman have one thing in common. They're both previous circus performers. And it was Haley's Circus is relative to the formation and the origin of Nightwing, who you of course become the first first Robin, Dick Grayson, and then the Hill Circus is what Deadman was part of, and both of them, both of their deaths and their origins are grounded in being circus performers. And they end up. This is only part one. I don't know how many parts this is going to be, but ultimately the enemy in this case that is sort of orchestrating what looks to be Nightwing sort of hallucinates, failing to save a woman who jumps off a bridge. And clearly there's this villain called the Unfallen that is sort of manipulating them and is also manipulating, it would appear, Deadman as well. We have appearances by Batgirl and Zatanna. And while they don't play a large role in the narrative, it's great to see Kelly Jones illustrate them. He's got it's funny when Kelly Jones has an exaggerated form body when he draws bodies, and there's a strange kind of wholesome sexiness, exaggerated sexiness to the way he draws women that I've always sort of been maybe perversely attracted to. That says more about me probably than anything else, to overshare. But I thought it was. I don't know where this is going, but the art really is incredible. I mean, his art's incredible. There's a double page spread here showing Deadman when he shows up. It just looks really good. I'm not sure where this is going, but I like that dichotomy between Deadman and Dick Grayson, and yeah. I again, I don't know where it's going. This sort of ends with sort of hinting at we only get the name of the source of the woes of Deadman and Nightwing, and it's just this Unfallen. I'm not sure where it's going, but I'm looking forward to as this flush out. This is obviously a first issue. It's all set up, or pardon me, this is the first chapter in Brave and the Bold of this, and it's all set up. But I thought it was quite good. What'd you think?
Yeah, I'm not the Kelly Jones fan that you are. I just don't care for his style. The exaggerated bat ears and the cape with 1,000 scallops at the bottom. It's never been a fan of his art, but he does do a reasonably good job here. And I've never read a story with Deadman and Nightwing in it before. Certainly not one that only stars the two of them. Nightwing does say in this, we've met a few times before, so clearly they've been in the same book before. But the fact that they are so similar in their origins and what they did or what have you makes them an interesting pair to find out. Yeah, we know very little about the Unfallen, but I'm very curious to find out where this is going to go. Very curious. And as much as I don't care for the Kelly Jones art, he is a good choice stylistically in terms of this is a horror story. Appears like it's going to be a horror story from Tim Seeley. So that is some place where his art does excel. I'd rather see him on a story like this that has sort of horror themes and leans into horror than on like the traditional Batman book like he was back in the day. So anyway, what are your thoughts on the second book, Time Jerks, or our second story, Time Jerks, where we see the Jurassic League?
I really enjoyed it. I thought Mark Russell, thank you, Mark Russell, and the artist John McKell. I thought this was interestingly enough, this. I think this is only one chapter, but the idea. I mean, really, is it surprising that Booster Gold somehow screws up and goes back in time, and he ends up in his time bubble hitting the asteroid 65 million years ago that was supposed to destroy all the dinosaurs on Earth, and of course he goes back to present only to find that all these dinosaurs, which originated in the form of the Jurassic League, that somehow he screwed up the timeline because of it. And I mean, it's really, I mean, we see all the Jurassic League characters here. We see typical Booster Gold dialogue. His you know, I mean, he just screws up, and he interacts, of course, with them. The Jurassic League helps Booster League get back in his time bubble. They're quite happy to see him leave. They're not sure what species he is, but they're glad he's gone. And then, of course, it ends with Booster Gold in present time discovering, it's sort of like a Planet of the Apes ending. He gets back only to discover that, oh my God, the entire world is filled with dinosaurs. The species of Homo sapien never developed on the planet Earth because the asteroid that destroyed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago was never hit the Earth because of what Booster Gold did in screwing up the timeline. Surprise, surprise. And it ends with him meeting a future version of the Jurassic League. I think it's a future version. I'm not sure if it's the same. I don't think they're immortal, so I'm assuming these are descendants of the original Jurassic League that he meets at the end, and it's to be continued. And I've had a lot of fun with it, and I'm looking forward to see it. The only thing that could make it better, I mean, actually, John McKell is the artist. He does a really good job here, but it would be kind of cool to see Daniel Warren Johnson do it as well. But kudos to John McKell as the art. He does a pretty good job. And Mike Spicer on colors. Surprising to see him on colors on this, but he does a pretty good job on the colors as well.
Yeah, one of the things I especially like about Mark Russell, he does a great job, maybe second only to Dan Jurgens, in the back and forth between Booster Gold and Skeets.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anybody that does it better than Dan Jurgens, but yeah, he gets back to present day and everybody's a dinosaur. There's no humans. And Skeets is like, well, you remember the asteroid you collided with? He says, no. Yeah, because you needed to change CDs? Oh, vaguely. The irresponsibility of Booster Gold on display from Mark Russell. So anyway, Delilah S. Dawson with part 4, the end of the Artemis story. What'd you think?
A lot of action. And I do think that there's not been a lot of substance to this story. I think this is the third or fourth chapter. It's just Artemis battling an army in a desert, and that's just been it. That's it. She's been wandering the desert, and the army. The plot is too simplistic. There's not enough substance to it. It doesn't warrant these number of chapters. This is. Again, it's beautiful. I mean, the art's good, but again, it's in service of a narrative that's sleep-inducing at the end of the day, because it's Artemis just fighting an army and that's it. And at the end, she gets rescued by Amazons, so we don't even get to see the finished product. We don't even get, she's rescued by other Amazons who discovered that she needed help, and that's really how it ends, and that's kind of it. And then it says, follow the saga of the Amazons in the pages of Wonder Woman. So this was very much a waste. It just straight up was. It's another example of that's related to my criticism of Tom King's Wonder Woman, that it's such a potentially awesome idea of the world being against the Amazons, even though it's been done before. What's all the potential? What's the fallout from that? Well, we had an opportunity here through 4 chapters of Artemis's adventures here, and all it is with her wandering in the desert and fighting a bunch of army men. We've already seen Wonder Woman fight the U.S. Army in one issue, and it was spectacular. But apparently it takes 4 chapters of Artemis to do the very same thing and then be picked up by Amazons. No story, no substance, no Sovereign, no other rogues galleries, members of Wonder Woman's rogues gallery, no nothing. And it's unfortunate. Clearly, there's no collaboration between Tom King, Delilah S. Dawson, or Josie Campbell when she wrote that miniseries that supposedly tied in with it. Overall, again, good visuals, but ultimately not contributing or heightening the main story proper of the Wonder Woman storyline. But might be harsh, but that's how I feel. What do you think?
I thought it was the best of the four. I know that's kind of
Agreed.
a low bar, but I
Yeah.
appreciated the action. I appreciated that we finally got some characterization for Artemis that felt authentic. She's talking about, I don't want to kill these guys, but I just don't want to be anywhere near them. And so I appreciated that. I appreciated, her getting in one of their helicopters and trying to fly away. And of course, we're going to shoot her down. And then actually some other Amazons show up to rescue her and take her away from the field of battle. And then, to be continued in the pages of Wonder Woman. So, yeah, I appreciated all that. I thought that it, from that perspective, that it worked. But yeah, it wasn't the best. It really wasn't. The story was not the best. So, and we'll leave it at that. The next story by Fialkov, where aliens crash lands on Earth. Batman's investigating. He ends up running into Guy Gardner. I don't think the Lissandro Esterin art works. Lissandro, if that name sounds familiar, did a lot of the artwork for the Sandman universe stories that we were reading. And I thought that in general, that was done really well. That style of art suited the story very, very well. That's supernatural. That's magic based stories. This is science fiction. This is superheroes. I don't think the style of art suits it at all. So this was probably my least favorite of the stories. Actually, I think I enjoyed this even less the um, than the Artemis story. So, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, it was interesting. It's actually a Roswell story. The I'm trying to who is the writer here on
Joshua Fialkov.
Joshua Fialkov. I don't. Batman is invading. Batman is invading. Batman is investigating what looks to be a Roswell-looking like UFO that crashes in Gotham, and he's talking to Hal Jordan. He wants Hal Jordan, a Green Lantern, to help him out, and that's pretty good idea. I mean, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, he'd know a lot about different types of alien flying saucers, but lo and behold, much to Batman's chagrin, it's pardon me, Guy Gardner that shows up, which
One
what's that?
One Punch.
Yeah, One Punch, exactly. And I was sort of looking forward. Is there going to be a One Punch into this story? This is only chapter one. Maybe we'll be getting a One Punch at some point. But Guy Gardner shows up, and ultimately, there's, of course, some quippy dialogue back and forth. So I thought Falkoff did a good job of, like, doing that. There was some humor in it. I enjoyed that. I thought the art actually suited the ambiance of the story, the tone, and because and in particular, the final page, I thought the way that he drew, it looked like a Roswell alien. And there's sort of a mystery here. And I like the way that it's built up, that even the Green Lantern ring seems to be a little clued out as to exactly what the origins of this alien is in this ship. And so a little bit of a mystery here, and it's whet my appetite. And I got to admit, the fact that it's Batman and Guy Gardner and this Roswell angle, I think, I'm intrigued, and I'm curious to read the next chapter. And I think the Lisandro art actually sort of grows on me, and so I'm looking forward to the next chapter. So,
Yeah, and I'll just say, if you guys are at a show where Kevin McGuire is, like he was at Phoenix this last weekend, speaking of One Punch, he has a fantastic print of the One Punch happening from a
yes, he
different
does.
angle, an angle that never appeared in the comic. It's really fantastic. So,
Yeah.
the last story by Jason Sean Alexander, it's a Joker story, and that's all I'm going to say about it. If you have anything to add, feel free.
Uh, well, I mean, it's called Perp Walk. It's by Jason Sean Alexander, artist and plot, and Rodney Barnes is the writer. And it's very straightforward. It's called Perp Walk, but it really addresses sort of like what the in story, it's referenced as a trauma bond between Batman and the Joker. And basically, what happens is it's very interesting. Batman, it's a quick story of Batman fighting the Joker, and then somebody, just a stranger off the street, walks up, pulls out a gun, and kills the Joker. Just kills the Joker. Straight up kills him. And then Batman arrests the guy, just looks to be just an average citizen. And there's a conversation between the guy that killed the Joker and Batman while Batman's taking him to Gotham PD. They're just having a conversation, and Batman asks him why he does it. And the guy answers Batman in a way that all of us kind of would expect. He said, well, you know what? I got sick and tired of you guys playing this game. I mean, it's like you both have trauma. You know, I killed him. I broke it. You should thank me. I finally broke this nonsense game of you and the Joker all the time. You capture the Joker. You throw him in Arkham Asylum. He escapes. Enough already. So I killed him. And I'm willing to go to jail for it. That's basically it. And then Batman talks about, you know, this guy suggested that maybe Batman needed him and what have you. And then Batman even sort of suggests that, almost impliedly at the end, he acknowledges that the Joker made him a better person. The Joker stays dead at the end of the story, stays dead. That's the end of the Joker. I suppose you could call this the final Joker story, you know, which probably is the way in real life it would end. Somebody just coming up and shooting Joker in the head. And Batman at the end just sort of walks, you know, touches the hand of the Joker almost in a creepy way with some sort of like horrific affection, and says thank you, because he's thanking the dead corpse of the Joker for, you know, probably making him a better crime fighter. And so, yeah, I actually thought this was the type of story that I would expect sort of like a layman to write who doesn't write a lot of comic books, saying, oh, if you had to write a Batman story, what would you write? You know, I think a lot of us would write a story similar to that. So I enjoyed it. I actually thought it was not bad. And yeah, it was, I thought it was interesting. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Joker story. I mean, I agree. It's super creepy. You know, I mean, the guy sums it up perfectly for me.
Yeah.
You know, when he says, yeah, the Joker stunted your growth, blah, blah, blah. And Batman's like, you killed the Joker for me. He's like, you lock him, you fight him, you lock him up, he gets out, rinse, repeat. And he says, the Joker was my greatest adversary. You know, when I started out, I wanted to be a symbol of fear, of justice. Joker changed all that. He pushed me past my comfort zone, made me better. And the guy says, to the untrained ear, it sounds like you loved him. And Batman's like, who could love a madman? And the guy's not wrong. The guy's not wrong. And it's kind of proven at the end, like you mentioned, he goes to the Joker's corpse and he says, still smiling, because even in death, the Joker's smiling. But yeah, then he touches his hand. Like, it's just, for lack of a better word, it's just creepy. It's just creepy. It's just a reminder of why the story was really a reminder of why I don't like the Joker. Because it's almost like Jason Sean Alexander, who did the art and the plot, and then Rodney Barnes did the scripting or did the dialogue or whatever. It's like Jason Sean Alexander saying the quiet part out loud. And so while I appreciated that, I don't like being reminded that it's going to fall on deaf ears, or DC's editorial is not going to change the way they treat the Joker based on this, which is sort of a biting criticism of the way they treat the Joker. It's not so different from what Bruno Redondo did. Also in Batman Brave and the Bold, or was it, maybe it was in the Harley Quinn Red, White, and Black, or whatever it was, where he did the Harley Quinn story talking about how nobody knows how to treat Harley, nobody treats her the same, or whatever. It was from a certain perspective, you could see it as a criticism of the way DC editorial handles Harley Quinn stories. Does that going to change? No, we've seen that it hasn't affected anything. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, that does it for the books. Again, there's 10 books, but the reason it took so long is because 2 of them are big anthologies, with the Batman Brave and the Bold and obviously the DC Pride. In terms of collections this week, there's only 3. We've got Batman the Knight trade paperback. That's the Chip Zdarsky written story that ties in very much with his ongoing Batman run. So this collects all 10 issues of it, 1 through 10. And then we've got Danger Street Volume 2, which collects the end of that run by Tom King, 7 through 12. And then finally, there's Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths trade paperback. It collects the entire 0 through 7, as well as Justice League 75, where the Justice League dies, and, quote unquote, written by Williamson, which leads into the current state that we have of DC now. It's okay. It's kind of messy. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it, but it's out in trade if you are so inclined. All right, Rocky, moment of truth. What do you got for your book of the week?
Um, well, I said yeah, I'm gonna go with primer number 3. I really enjoyed it for the reasons that we stated. It's great. It's the best edition of the DC universe. I've said before. I want it to be mainstream, and I really like the character. And yeah, I'm definitely a fan of Primer. What about you?
Yeah, great pick. I'm gonna pick DC Pride. Um, not there's a couple stories that I didn't really care for or what have you. But if I had to pick, the story this week that's going to stick with me, that I'm going to be thinking about, long time after, it's that Phil Jimenez story. Um, so I can't not pick DC Pride based on that story. Like if there's one story that I think every comic fan should read this week, it's that, it's not the entirety of the DC Pride, although there are some other good stories in there. Um, but that Phil Jimenez story, again, just like I said about the Kevin Conroy story last year's DC Pride, it's phenomenal. Like you said, it shows the power of comics. And it was just fantastic. So that's my pick.
Yeah, oh, that's good.
Okay,
So
well, that's going to do it, everybody. We appreciate the support as always. Don't forget, if you're listening to the audio only version of this, make sure you head over to YouTube and subscribe to Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom! Subscribe, ring the notification bell, leave comments below. Let us know what you thought of the books this week. And conversely, if you are checking us out on YouTube, you check us out every week, and you want to go listen to the audio only content from the past, there's 2,500 episodes of the Comic Source audio only on the podcast feed. So just go to wherever you get your podcasts, your favorite podcast platform or app, do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. You can also search for the Comic Source on YouTube. That's where all our interviews going forward are posted, as well as Spawn reviews, Spawn Daily, all that sort of stuff is on there. So we appreciate the support as always. Looking forward to getting back together with Rocky to do a recap of our Madcap adventures at Phoenix Fan Fusion this last weekend. Yeah, hopefully we'll have time to do that here in the next few weeks.
yeah,
So,
that's right. No,
yeah.
for sure.
So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We appreciate the support as always, and we will talk to you next time.
Catch you later.